It was a bright sunny afternoon at Buckingham Palace, when the first whispers of the scandal began to spread. The event was supposed to be one of the grandest the royal family had ever hosted, an elegant gathering of influential figures from across the globe. Queen Camilla, as always, stood at the center, looking regal in her evening attire, gracefully moving through the guests with her warm smile. Her every gesture was measured, poised. It was this image of calm control that had earned her a beloved spot in the hearts of the British public. She was the Queen, a symbol of the monarchy, the pillar on which the royal family relied. But on this particular day, that image of grace and authority was shattered in the most unexpected way. The royal event was filled with the usual pomp and circumstance, important dignitaries mingling, music playing softly in the background, and guests exchanging pleasantries under the gold-embellished chandeliers. As the Queen circulated among the crowd, chatting and making everyone feel welcome, something happened that no one could have predicted. One of the royal guards, stationed near the entrance, was suddenly summoned into the palace. It was a quiet call, so as not to disrupt the festivities, but soon enough rumors started circulating. At first no one could understand what had taken place, just a few hushed conversations, a bit of confusion. But it wasn't long before the news spread like wildfire. Queen Camilla had made a serious accusation against one of her most trusted guards. The guard, a tall, disciplined man who had been with the royal family for many years, was accused of a grave breach of conduct. Camilla had claimed he had broken one of the strictest rules of royal protocol, an accusation that, if proven true, would not only ruin the guard's career, but also create a scandal that the monarchy might struggle to recover from. As word of the accusation reached the palace aides and staff, the atmosphere shifted instantly from one of celebration to tension. No one could believe what they were hearing. How could something like this happen within the palace? It was hard to comprehend. For those who had worked closely with Queen Camilla, the news was especially shocking. She had always been known for her composed and dignified demeanor. Her public image was that of a queen who balanced grace with a sense of duty. She had been the epitome of what a royal figure should be, always calm, collected, and aware of her every word and action. So when the first reports of the accusation started trickling in, many assumed it had been a mistake or misunderstanding. But the longer the investigation went on, the clearer it became that something serious was unfolding. Inside the palace, the aides who worked for Queen Camilla began to question everything they knew about her. Was the accusation true? Or was there something more to this than met the eye? Staff members who had been loyal to the Queen for years were now divided, unsure whether they could continue supporting her or whether they would have to distance themselves from the royal family entirely. What was the real story behind the Queen's allegation? The palace quickly launched an internal inquiry to get to the bottom of the situation. The investigation was swift and secretive, as is customary in matters involving the royal family. At first, the royal guards and palace staff were told not to speak to the press about the matter. However, the secrecy only fueled the rumors. The media, hungry for a story, began reporting on every little detail, even the smallest pieces of information that leaked out. The story was quickly picked up by journalists and spread across the country. While the public initially assumed the accusation would blow over quietly, it didn't take long for the press to start digging deeper into the Queen's personal life and character. Speculation ran rampant. Was this just a case of one royal guard making a mistake? Or was there something darker at play? The Queen had always been seen as someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that the monarchy continued to thrive. But now questions were being asked about her own conduct. Was her image of a perfect, regal figure only a mask, hiding something more complex beneath? It was this very idea, the possibility, that the Queen was not the person everyone believed her to. First, that began to grab the attention of the public. What made this accusation even more intriguing was the fact that the royal guard in question had served the Queen for several years. He was a fixture at royal events, often seen in the background, standing tall and silent as he carried out his duties. He had earned the respect of his fellow officers and the palace staff. No one ever expected him to be at the center of such an intense situation. He was known for his discipline and commitment, qualities that made the accusation seem even more out of place. But as the investigation moved forward, it became apparent that the guard wasn't the only one who had something to answer for. Those closest to Queen Camilla began to question her version of events. Had the Queen made a mistake? Or was there something more personal driving the accusation? Had she misinterpreted the situation, or was there something she wasn't telling anyone? The Palisades knew the stakes were high. The monarchy's image was at risk, and the royal family couldn't afford another scandal, especially one involving a queen who had long worked to establish her reputation as a stabilizing force within the royal household. Camilla had already faced much criticism over the years for her past, but now she stood accused of something that threatened to destroy everything she had worked for. As the public waited for more details to emerge, the royal family braced itself for what was to come. The scandal had the potential to tear apart the carefully constructed image of Queen Camilla, who had worked hard to win over the public after years of being the subject of media scrutiny. Now everything she had built was on the line and the world was watching. As the days passed after Queen Camilla's startling accusation, the palace remained shrouded in a heavy silence, a stark contrast to the usual hum of royal activities. The grand event that had brought together the world's most influential figures now seemed like a distant memory. Now all eyes were on the royal family, the media speculating at every turn and the public waiting for any hint of an official statement. Inside the palace walls, however, things were far from quiet. Behind the scenes, a tense atmosphere had taken over, as the royal aides scrambled to manage the fallout. Queen Camilla's accusation against the royal guard had shaken the palace to its core. Everyone, from the highest-ranking members of the household to the junior staff, was on edge. The investigation into the matter was now underway, and no one knew exactly where it would lead. But what was certain was that things would never be the same again. The palace's internal inquiry was designed to get to the bottom of the accusation swiftly and quietly. As was customary in royal matters, every detail had to be handled with the utmost discretion. The investigator spoke with everyone who had been at the event, seeking any clue, no matter how small, that might explain what had happened. The Queen herself, of course, was heavily involved in the process, giving her own testimony. But it was clear from the very beginning that her version of events was starting to raise some serious questions. The Queen's account of what had transpired that day seemed a little too perfect, too rehearsed. She described the moment in great detail, painting a picture of the guard breaking royal protocol in front of a room full of important guests. But the more the investigators dug into the events of that day, the more they found things that didn't quite add up. For one, the guard had been positioned far from the Queen when the incident was said to have occurred. His duties that day were clear. He was tasked with monitoring the entrance to the event, not interacting with the Queen or the guests. In fact, several of the other guards who were stationed with him on duty confirmed that there had been no breach of protocol from his side. In fact, they recalled seeing him standing perfectly still, doing his job as expected, just like he always had. His behavior had been beyond reproach, and the suggestion that he would suddenly break protocol was difficult for them to accept. The more the investigators spoke to the other palace staff, the more inconsistencies emerged in Queen Camilla's version of events. Some staff members noted that the Queen had been in an unusually stressed state that day. It was no secret that royal events, particularly those involving foreign dignitaries, could be extremely high pressure. But those who were closest to the Queen suggested that she had seemed even more tense than usual. One palace aide even mentioned that she had overheard a conversation in which the Queen seemed agitated, worried about how the event would be perceived in the media. Could that tension have clouded her judgment? And then there was the fact that the royal guard in question had never been known for making mistakes. He had served the royal family with loyalty and dedication for years. Those who worked with him couldn't recall a single time he had ever faltered on duty. He had a reputation for being thorough, precise, and disciplined, traits that were admired by both his fellow guards and the palace staff. For someone like him to suddenly act out of character seemed unlikely. As the investigation deepened, it became apparent that there were multiple layers to this story. Some began to wonder whether Queen Camilla's accusation had been the result of a misunderstanding. It wasn't entirely out of the question that a moment of stress could lead to a misinterpretation of an event. After all, the Queen had been surrounded by so many people that day. Could she have mistaken the guards' actions for something they weren't? Perhaps there was a simple explanation, but there were others who began to ask even more difficult questions. Some palace insiders started to wonder whether there was more to the story than just a misstep or a moment of confusion. Could Queen Camilla have been influenced by something other than the events themselves? Had there been personal tensions between the Queen and the Guard that might have played a role? Some of the staff members who knew the Queen well suggested that her frustration could have been directed elsewhere. The Royal Guard, after all, was not just another member of the palace staff. He had a significant role in the daily operations of the royal household. He was, at times, the first point of contact for the royal family when they arrived at events, a trusted presence in an otherwise chaotic environment. It was also known that the Queen had been under more stress than usual recently, dealing with the demands of public life and the ever-present scrutiny of her every move. Could she have been taking out her frustration on someone who seemed like an easy target? The royal family as a whole knew that the outcome of this investigation could affect their standing with the public. The monarchy was built on trust and tradition, and scandals, no matter how small, could quickly escalate into something far more damaging. For many in the royal household, the focus wasn't just on the truth of the accusation itself, but on how the public would react to it. The Queen's image, which had been carefully crafted over the years, was at risk. The monarchy's reputation, as always, was fragile. As the media began to get hold of the story, the pressure on the royal family grew. Journalists eager for answers began questioning every aspect of the investigation. Headlines began to surface, suggesting that the Queen's actions were driven by something deeper than mere protocol. Could this have been a case of personal frustration boiling over, or was it a carefully calculated move to discredit someone who had fallen out of favor? With every new detail that emerged, the mystery deepened. The public was caught in a whirlwind of rumors and speculation, waiting for the royal family to offer an official statement. But the palace remained silent, refusing to comment until the investigation had been concluded. This only fueled the fire. People wanted answers, and they wanted them now. Every twist and turn in the story sent shockwaves through the press, and even those closest to the Queen couldn't be sure what the truth was anymore. It seemed as though the investigation would drag on for days, even weeks. The royal aides, who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, were growing more and more anxious. They understood the gravity of the situation and knew that the royal family's future could depend on the outcome of this investigation. Every word, every action would be scrutinized, and there would be no easy way out. For Queen Camilla, the pressure was mounting. As the days turned into weeks, her once calm exterior began to show cracks. The public's trust in her was starting to erode, and the royal family knew that they needed to act quickly. The question now wasn't just about what had happened between the Queen and the Guard. It was about what came next. Would the truth come to light, or would the palace's silence be enough to protect them from the fallout? As the investigation continued, one thing was certain: the royal family would never be the same again. As the investigation into Queen Camilla's accusation against the Royal Guard continued, new pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each more startling than the last. It seemed as though every step forward only uncovered more questions. The public's curiosity grew with each passing day, and the palace was under more scrutiny than ever before. But just when everyone thought they had heard it all, the Royal Guard in question revealed something that no one could have anticipated. His testimony would shatter everything that the Queen had claimed and send shockwaves through the entire monarchy. The Royal Guard had always been a man of few words. He wasn't the type to draw attention to himself, preferring to remain in the background and do his duty without fanfare. However, as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this man had something important to say. His quiet demeanor made it hard for anyone to imagine that he could be involved in anything controversial. But when he finally spoke out, it was not what anyone expected. His revelation was not just about the accusation itself. It was about something far deeper, something far more personal. The Royal Guard had been one of the most trusted members of the royal household. For years, he had been by Queen Camilla's side during state events, providing the same dutiful presence he had always provided. He had performed his job with precision, never once stepping out of line. No one could have predicted that he would be at the center of a scandal involving the Queen. Yet, there he was, standing up to give his side of the story, and in doing so, he would reveal something that no one could have guessed. He began by explaining the events of that day in great detail, but what caught everyone's attention was not the explanation of the accusation, but the way he described his interactions with the Queen. It was clear that, for years, there had been something between them that no one had noticed. The guard revealed that he had often been in close proximity to the Queen, not just during royal events but in quieter moments as well. While he had always been just a guard to most, it seemed that to Camilla, their relationship was something more complex. He spoke of how the Queen had often confided in him during moments of stress, a luxury that she rarely afforded to anyone else in the royal household. Over the years, they had shared conversations that went beyond the usual pleasantries of royal duty. The Queen, despite her regal composure, had moments of vulnerability, and the guard had been one of the few people she had trusted with those moments. He had always kept these conversations private, understanding the weight of his position. But now, in the face of this accusation, he felt it was time to speak up. What shocked everyone even more was the nature of the conversations. The Queen had often expressed frustrations with her royal duties, her position in the family, and the constant public scrutiny she faced. She had confided in the guard about her struggles, the pressure she felt, and the isolation she sometimes experienced as a member of the royal family. The guard revealed that over time, these conversations had grown more frequent, especially in the months leading up to the accusation. It was clear that the Queen was feeling overwhelmed, and the weight of her responsibilities was starting to take a toll on her. But it wasn't just the Queen's personal struggles that the guard revealed. He also spoke about the moments when Camilla had seemed angry, even upset with certain members of the royal family. She had never directly said it, but the guard could sense her frustration with how certain events were being handled, especially in relation to her public image. It seemed that she was increasingly concerned about how the public viewed her, and how the monarchy would be affected by her actions. These private moments painted a picture of a woman struggling with her role, caught between the expectations of the royal family and her own personal desires. The guard's revelation sent shockwaves through the royal family and beyond. It was a side of Queen Camilla that the public had never seen. For years, she had been portrayed as the calm, composed, and graceful consort of King Charles. But now the guard's words suggested that there was more beneath the surface, a complexity to her character that no one had ever fully understood. The Queen, it seemed, was not just a figurehead of the monarchy. She was a woman who faced real emotional challenges, who grappled with the pressure of her role in a way that was both private and painful. In the days following the guard's statement, the media went into overdrive. Headlines screamed of the Queen's emotional turmoil, of her frustrations and private struggles. Some reporters painted her as a victim of the royal system, trapped in a life of duty and expectation. Others, however, used the guard's revelation to question her judgment and her ability to carry out her royal responsibilities. The royal family, which had long relied on a sense of unity and composure, was now divided. The palace had no choice but to respond. They issued a brief statement, acknowledging the guard's testimony and promising a thorough investigation into the matter. But behind closed doors, things were far more complicated. King Charles, who had always been a source of support for Camilla, now found himself in the midst of a storm he couldn't control. The Queen's reputation was at stake, and every move she made was now under intense scrutiny. As for Camilla, her public image had been forever altered. The image of the calm, composed Queen that the public had admired for years now seemed like a distant memory. The guard's testimony had exposed a side of her that many were not prepared to see, but it also humanized her in a way that many had not expected. The public, once captivated by her poised exterior, now saw her as a woman with real struggles, someone who, despite her royal title, was still vulnerable to the pressures of life. In the palace, the Queen was left to face the fallout from the guard's revelation. The damage to her reputation was already done, and she knew that the road to redemption, if it was even possible, would be long and uncertain. She had always prided herself on her ability to handle difficult situations with grace, but this was different. This was a crisis that not only affected her, but also the entire monarchy. Her every move, every word would now be closely examined. But despite the whirlwind of controversy that surrounded her, Queen Camilla remained determined. She knew that she had a responsibility to her family, to the monarchy, and to the people of the United Kingdom. It was clear that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was not one to back down from a challenge. As the investigation continued, the Queen found herself at a crossroads. Would she be able to reclaim her image, or would this scandal be the end of her reign as Queen Consort?